This planet twisted reality, reshaping itself with every passing hour, but they moved through its chaos like a single, unbreakable current, a collective of silent, lethal grace, and I knew my survival now hinged on understanding their impossible unity. The crash had been a symphony of metal rending and alarm screaming, but the silence that followed, here on Xylos 7, was far more deafening. My ship, once my sanctuary, was now a crumpled, smoking ruin, sinking slowly into a mire of bubbling, iridescent sludge. Every breath was a gamble, the air thick with spores and the scent of ozone and something unidentifiably organic, something that prickled the back of my throat. The ground beneath my boots was a shifting mosaic of living rock and bioluminescent fungi, constantly changing, pulsating with an unseen rhythm. Landmasses rose and fell like monstrous lungs breathing, rivers of acid snaked across the landscape, and flora burst into bloom, withered, and died in the span of hours. Survival here wasn't about adaptation. It was about hyperadaptation, a constant, frantic scramble against a world that actively defied permanence. I'd been alone for what felt like cycles, scavenging what little was left of my supplies, my comms fried, my hope dwindling to a flickering ember. The isolation was a creeping frost, chilling me to the bone, even as the alien sun beat down with a relentless, purplish light. My own thoughts, once a comfort, had become a torment, echoing the certainty of my demise. Then I saw them. They moved through a grove of skeletal, ruby-red trees, their branches twisting into grotesque, predatory shapes. There were 5 of them, their forms silhouetted against the ever-changing sky. They weren't wearing suits, no protective gear against the volatile atmosphere. Their skin, visible even from a distance, seemed to absorb and reflect the strange light, shimmering with an unearthly luminescence. They were tall, slender, with an almost predatory elegance to their movements, like apex predators carved from moonlight and shadow. Their hair was a uniform, impossibly deep violet, falling past their waists, shimmering with an inner light that pulsed in perfect synchronicity with each other. Their eyes, even from this distance, seemed to glow, a piercing, unnerving emerald. They moved as one, not just in formation, but as a single, fluid entity. When one stepped, the others followed, their limbs mirroring each other with impossible precision. When one turned her head, the others did too, a synchronized snap that sent a shiver down my spine. It was like watching a single organism with multiple bodies. A sudden tremor shook the ground, and a chasm ripped open just meters in front of them, disgorging a geyser of boiling, phosphorescent liquid. I instinctively dove for cover, but they didn't even flinch. Their movements became impossibly swift, a blur of synchronized motion. One of them, the central figure perhaps, with slightly broader shoulders and a more commanding presence, raised a hand. The others followed suit, their fingers splayed, and a shimmering, almost invisible force field rippled outward from their combined effort, deflecting the corrosive spray. They looked towards me then, a slow, synchronized turn of their heads, their emerald eyes fixing on my hiding spot. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. They didn't register alarm or surprise. Only a detached, collective curiosity, like a group of scientists observing a new, albeit minor, specimen. They began to approach, their movements fluid and silent, their synchronized footsteps leaving no discernible prints on the shifting ground. My heart hammered against my ribs, a primal fear seizing me. Were they sentient? Hostile? What were they? I swallowed, forcing myself to stand. Hello. My voice, hoarse from disuse, sounded impossibly loud and fragile in the alien silence. They stopped meters away, their collective gaze unblinking. The central figure, taller than the rest, tilted her head slightly. The others mirrored her. It was unsettling, profoundly so. I'm stranded, I tried again, gesturing to the distant wreckage of my ship. My vessel crashed. I'm a survivor. Human. Silence. Their expressions remained unreadable, their eyes, those glowing emerald depths, seeming to look through me, not at me. Then, one of them, a smaller figure on the left, reached out a hand, her slender fingers unfurling. The others mirrored her, their hands extending in perfect unison. There was no menace in the gesture, no invitation either. Just an extension. I hesitated, my instincts screaming caution. But my isolation, my desperate need for connection, for understanding, won out. Slowly, tentatively, I extended my own hand. As my fingers brushed against the central figure's palm, a jolt went through me, not painful, but deeply unsettling. It was a rush of sensation, a kaleidoscope of images, a fleeting glimpse of the bubbling mire from above, a taste of the strange, mineral-rich air, the faint thrum of the planet's core. It wasn't my senses. It was theirs dash. Shared. For a split second, I felt an overwhelming unity, a sense of boundless connection, before it snapped away, leaving me disoriented and breathless. They retracted their hands, their eyes still fixed on me. The central figure, her gaze unwavering, seemed to transmit a thought, a single, wordless impression into my mind. Anomaly dash. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. Telepathy? Empathy? Or something far more alien? My communication attempts were met with silent, synchronized responses. No words. Only collective impressions. They turned, as one, and continued their path through the shifting landscape, moving with that terrifying, elegant unity. I watched them go, a strange mix of fear and fascination warring within me. They left me behind, alone again, but not entirely. The echo of that shared sensation, the fleeting glimpse into a collective consciousness, lingered in my mind, a haunting, intoxicating memory. My survival, I realized, now hinged not just on enduring this hostile planet, but on understanding these beings, these Hive Sisters. The planet decided my fate, as it always did. A sudden, violent acid storm erupted, seemingly from nowhere, boiling the very air. My makeshift shelter, a flimsy lean-to fashioned from salvaged hull plating, offered little protection. The acidic rain hissed as it ate away at the metal, and the ground around me began to liquefy. I was exposed, vulnerable, on the verge of being dissolved. Then, through the corrosive mist, I saw them. The Hive Sisters. They moved like rays through the storm, seemingly unaffected by its fury. Their forms, now shimmering with a faint, self-generated field, were a beacon of stability in the chaos. They weren't seeking shelter. They were adapting dash. One of them, the slenderest, with glowing markings that pulsed faintly on her forearms, turned her head. Her emerald eyes met mine through the driving acid rain. A thought, clearer this time, entered my mind, accompanied by an impression of detached tolerance. Follow dash. I didn't hesitate. Survival instinct, pure and undiluted, propelled me forward. I crawled, then scrambled, towards them, my skin already beginning to burn from the acidic spray. As I neared them, the shimmering field around them expanded, just enough to encompass me. The acid rain hissed and steamed against its invisible barrier, but I was safe. Saved. I collapsed, gasping, shaking, the raw terror slowly receding. They didn't acknowledge my gratitude or my presence. They simply continued to move, their synchronized pace unwavering, pulling me along in their wake. My proximity was not an alliance, merely a necessity of the moment. I was a burden, but a tolerated one. For the next cycles, I became their shadow, their reluctant observer. They moved with an efficiency that bordered on supernatural. When a patch of land would liquefy, they anticipated it, their steps shifting in perfect unison, crossing the treacherous ground with a grace that defied physics. When a new, predatory life form would emerge from the depths of the planet, grotesque, multi-limbed creatures with fangs like obsidian knives, they would react as one. Their movements would become a deadly ballet, a synchronized strike that dismembered the creature with frightening precision, their attacks perfectly coordinated. Each sister anticipating the other's actions before they even thought them. They used no weapons, only their bodies, honed to lethal perfection. I watched, mesmerized, as they adapted. Their skin would subtly shift color, camouflaging them against the background. Their eyes would glow brighter in low light, or narrow into slits against blinding glare. Once, one of them lost her footing on a crumbling ridge. Before she could fall, another, without a glance, instinctively shifted her weight, extended an arm, and caught her, the movement so fluid it seemed as if they were tethered by invisible bonds. Their unity was not just a tactic, it was an intrinsic part of their being. I tried to communicate, again and again. Words, gestures, pleas. They would acknowledge me with a silent, synchronized turn of their heads, their emerald eyes holding that same detached curiosity. Sometimes, if I pointed at a source of food or water, they would silently assess it, and if it was deemed safe, one of them would retrieve it, extending it to me without a word, their movements still perfectly coordinated. They provided for me, not out of benevolence, but out of a pragmatic necessity. They were too efficient to let a potential data source die without study. My observations became obsessive. I watched their subtle interactions. The way their breathing would synchronize, a low, collective hum that resonated in the very air around them. The way their facial muscles would subtly shift, mirroring each other, expressing a shared calculation, a collective decision, without a single word. They were a single mind distributed across multiple bodies. And slowly, terrifyingly, I began to feel echoes of it. It started subtly. A shared pang of hunger, not just my own, but a collective emptiness. A flicker of cold calculation when they assessed a new threat. A brief, almost overwhelming surge of satisfaction when they successfully navigated a particularly treacherous terrain. It was like tuning into a radio frequency, faint at first, then growing stronger, clearer. Their thoughts, their feelings were not separate entities, but parts of a vast, flowing current, and I, the anomaly, was beginning to feel its pull. Their beauty, I realized, was not conventional. It was the beauty of perfect efficiency, of absolute harmony. Their movements, once merely graceful, now seemed profoundly sensual, a mesmerizing dance of interconnected life, a physical manifestation of their unified consciousness. There was an eroticism in their seamless unity, in their shared being, in the way they anticipated each other's needs, not through words, but through an intrinsic understanding that bypassed all individuality. It was a silent, living poem of pure existence, and it was alluring beyond measure. My own isolation, the crushing weight of being truly alone in this hostile universe, made their unity seem like the ultimate salvation. To be part of something so complete, so efficient, so utterly interconnected, the thought was both terrifying and profoundly appealing. To shed the burden of individual thought, of loneliness, of constant, exhausting decision-making, and simply be part of the flow. One cycle, as we rested in a temporary lull between environmental upheavals, the central figure, the one I had first touched, approached me. She knelt, her emerald eyes piercing into mine, and this time, the connection was not a jolt, but a gentle, pervasive current, pulling me deeper. A torrent of images, sensations, and emotions flooded my mind. I saw the planet, not as a chaotic mess, but as a vast, complex network of energy and matter, its constant flux and natural rhythm. I felt the intricate dance of flora and fauna, the subtle currents of the air, the deep thrum of the core. It was overwhelming, disorienting, yet strangely exhilarating. I felt the individual consciousnesses of the sisters within this current, distinct yet intertwined, like threads in a vast, luminous tapestry. And I felt their presence, their collective awareness, exploring my mind, my memories, my fears, my very essence. Anomaly, integration, potential, the thoughts were not words, but concepts imbued with a cold, objective assessment. Then, a sudden surge of emotion, not mine, but there's a wave of profound, universal, belonging dash. It was the feeling of absolute acceptance, of being intrinsically part of something greater, of never being alone again. It was the antidote to every fear, every loneliness I had ever known. And it was intoxicating. It was everything I had unknowingly craved since the crash. I felt a subtle probing at the edges of my own mind, a gentle, yet insistent pressure, like water seeking an open channel. They were offering it. Integration. Absorption. The choice, unspoken, terrifyingly clear, was laid bare, to surrender to this ultimate connection, to shed my individuality and become part of their perfect unity, or to resist, to cling to my singular, agonizing existence in this unforgiving world. The allure was almost irresistible. To finally silence the screaming void of loneliness. To finally find peace, efficiency, and belonging. But then, a flicker of something else. Within the torrent of shared consciousness, I caught a glimpse of older memories, not theirs, but echoes, fragmented remnants of other minds, other anomalies. They weren't just integrating. They were absorbing, consuming. The beauty of their unity came at the cost of individuality, of identity. Each new member, each new mind, added to their strength, their knowledge, their adaptability, but at the ultimate price of their former self. The faint, glowing markings on their skin, I realized, weren't just decorative. They were indicators of absorbed essence, of integrated life. My breath hitched. I wasn't just a potential resource. I was a potential meal. My mind, my unique self, would be dissolved, digested, becoming merely a component in their vast, inscrutable collective. The fascination curdled into horror. Their eerie unity was a form of exquisite predation. Their beauty was a gilded trap. Do not resist, the collective thought hummed, no longer gentle, but with a subtle, underlying command. It is illogical, futile. Your current form is inefficient. Your individuality, a weakness. Become strength. Become us. I tore myself away from the connection, scrambling back, breaking physical contact with the central figure. The world snapped back into sharp, painful focus. The sounds of the planet, the burn of the air, the crushing weight of my loneliness, they rushed back, familiar, terrifying, but mind-dash. No, I rasped, my voice raw. I won't. I won't lose myself. Their synchronized heads tilted again, their emerald eyes holding that same detached curiosity, but now with a faint glimmer of something else, a collective assessment of my new status. Resistant. Unstable. Yet potent. A challenge. The air around them thickened, permeated by a faint, musky scent I hadn't noticed before, a subtle pheromone designed not for attraction, but for compulsion, for breaking down resistance. My mind wavered, yearning for the comfort of the collective, for the ease of surrender. It was a battle not just for my body, but for my very identity. The conflict was inevitable. It came in the form of the environment, as always, the planet itself delivering the final, brutal test. A colossal landmass, miles across, began to heave and crack, tearing itself apart. From the depths, something emerged. Not a mere creature, but a living mountain of chitin and raw, pulsating energy, a titan of Xylos, 7, a migratory predator that consumed everything in its path. It was the alpha predator of this world, and we were directly in its path. The Hive Sisters reacted instantly, their synchronized movements becoming more urgent, more precise. They began to run, their speed astonishing, adapting their path to the crumbling ground, weaving through pillars of erupting lava and swarms of smaller, venomous creatures fleeing the behemoth. I ran with them, fueled by pure adrenaline, but my human limits were glaringly apparent. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed, my every move clumsy and inefficient compared to their seamless flow. They were the current, I was a lone, struggling fish caught in its wake. The Titan predator roared, a sound that vibrated through the very bedrock, shaking my bones. It was gaining on us. I stumbled, falling hard on the unstable ground, my ankle twisting with a sickening pop. Pain, sharp and immediate, lanced through me. I cried out, unable to move, trapped. The Hive Sisters stopped, meters ahead. They turned, all 5 pairs of emerald eyes fixing on me. Their heads tilted in unison. And then, a thought, clearer than any before, colder than any I had yet received. Inefficient. A liability. Release. My heart plummeted. They weren't going to save me. I was to be abandoned. A discarded resource. But then, the central figure, the one I had touched, did something unexpected. She detached herself from the group. She moved towards me, her face unreadable, her movements still fluid, but now with a subtle difference, a microsecond delay that suggested individual choice, a deviation from the perfect sync. The Titan predator was close now, its shadow falling over us, its multifaceted eyes fixing on my helpless form. The Hive Sisters, the 4 remaining ones, continued their synchronized escape, their forms disappearing into the chaos, leaving the central figure and me behind. Choice, her thought resonated in my mind, stark and unyielding, cutting through my fear. Integration, or consumption by the void beast. Your individual end, or collective beginning. She reached out her hand again, her palm open, beckoning. Her emerald eyes glowed, and I could feel the subtle pull of their collective consciousness, intensified, focused solely on me now. The promise of belonging, of efficient survival, of an end to pain and loneliness, was almost overwhelming. To simply merge, to become one with something so powerful, so utterly capable. My entire being screamed in protest. The idea of losing myself, of my individual consciousness dissolving into their vast, impersonal network, was the ultimate horror. But the roar of the void beast was deafening, its hot, noxious breath washing over me. Death was imminent. Annihilation. Was assimilation better than obliteration? Was a shared existence, devoid of self, preferable to an individual, agonizing end? I looked at her hand, shimmering faintly with that irresistible, alluring power. Her physical beauty, once so captivating, was now a mask for the terrifying truth of their unity. My memories, my unique history, my love, my loss, my entire existence, it would all be absorbed, processed, becoming data, fuel for their eternal, evolving collective. No, I wouldn't. With a surge of desperate, defiant will, I forced my twisted ankle to bear weight, a scream of pain tearing from my lips. I pushed myself up, staggering. No, I gasped, shaking my head. I am myself. Her eyes, for the first time, showed a flicker of something akin to surprise, a ripple in her calm facade. I turned, not towards the receding form of the Hive Sisters, but away from them, away from the path of easy escape, towards a narrow crevice in the rapidly forming landmass. It was a gamble, a tiny, unstable fissure that might lead to a deeper cavern, or to my immediate death. But it was my choice, my death. The central figure watched me, her gaze unblinking. The air vibrated with her unspoken challenge, her final offer. I stumbled, crawled, threw myself into the crevice just as the ground behind me shuddered violently, engulfed by the void beast's crushing maw. The last thing I saw was the central figure, still standing, perfectly poised, her face utterly serene, watching me disappear, an enigma of perfect, terrifying unity. I fell, and fell, through darkness, through crumbling rock, through layers of the constantly shifting planet, the sounds of the void beast's consumption fading behind me. My body screamed with every impact, every bruise, every scrape. But my mind was clear. I was alive. And I was still me dash. I landed, hard, on a bed of phosphorescent moss, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs. Pain bloomed across my body, searing and real. But I welcomed it. It was the taste of my own existence, unadulterated, unshared. I lay there for a long time, listening to the guttural rumbling of the planet's depths, the distant echoes of the surface's constant upheaval. My ankle was shattered, my ribs possibly cracked, my body a ruin. Survival would be a miracle, but I had chosen, and I had kept myself. The darkness of the cavern was absolute, broken only by the soft, ethereal glow of the moss beneath me. And in that silence, I heard it again, not a spoken word, but a resonant thought, faint, distant, but undeniably there. The hum of the collective. It was a whisper of shared knowledge, of effortless adaptation, of absolute belonging. A tempting, insidious melody of a world without loneliness, without pain, without fear. It was them. They were still there, still a presence, even from a distance. The central figure, the one who had offered me integration, or perhaps the entire collective, now watching me, not with curiosity, but with a lingering, almost sympathetic appraisal. Survival, improbable. The collective thought hummed, filled with a cold, objective truth. Individuality, a path to dissolution. I closed my eyes, gritting my teeth against the pain. I was broken, adrift, on a planet that wanted to consume me. But I was my own dash. The allure of the Hive Sisters, their terrifying unity, their promise of ultimate belonging, would forever haunt me. The image of their synchronized movements, their glowing eyes, their serene, unnerving beauty was seared into my mind. I had glimpsed a different form of existence, one that redefined the very meaning of self and connection. And it was both the most terrifying and the most profoundly seductive thing I had ever encountered. I had chosen the pain of reality, the loneliness of individuality, over the blissful absorption of the collective. But as I lay in the dark, my body broken, the whispers of their unity, the tempting promise of a shared mind, lingered, a ghost in my thoughts, a constant, unsettling question. Was my freedom truly worth the cost of this unbearable, isolating reality? Or had I condemned myself to a more painful, prolonged form of dissolution, all for the fleeting illusion of being truly, uniquely me dash? The answer was lost in the vast, unforgiving silence of Xylos 7. My ship, once my sanctuary, was just a crumpled wreck, vanishing into the boiling mire. Days on Xylos 7 had stretched, each a desperate fight for survival. I had been alone, truly alone, until I met them. The Hive Sisters. They moved as a single organism, a lethal dance of grace and efficiency. And I knew my survival hinged on understanding their impossible unity. I fell, and fell, through darkness, through crumbling rock, through layers of the constantly shifting planet, the sounds of the void beast's consumption fading behind me. My body screamed from every impact, every bruise, every scrape. But my mind was clear. I was alive, and I was still myself. I landed, hard, on a bed of phosphorescent moss, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs. Pain bloomed across my body, searing and real. But I welcomed it. It was the taste of my own existence, unadulterated, unshared. I lay there for a long time, listening to the guttural rumbling of the planet's depths, the distant echoes of the surface's constant upheaval. My ankle was shattered, my ribs possibly cracked, my body a ruin. Survival would be a miracle, but I had chosen, and I had kept myself. The darkness of the cavern was absolute, broken only by the soft, ethereal glow of the moss beneath me. And in that silence, I heard it again, not a spoken word, but a resonant thought, faint, distant, but undeniably there. The hum of the collective. It was a whisper of shared knowledge, of effortless adaptation, of absolute belonging. A tempting, insidious melody of a world without loneliness, without pain, without fear. It was them. They were still there, still a presence, even from a distance. The central figure, the one who had offered me integration, or perhaps the entire collective, now watching me, not with curiosity, but with a lingering, almost sympathetic appraisal. Survival, improbable, the collective thought hummed, filled with a cold, objective truth. Individuality, a path to dissolution. I closed my eyes, gritting my teeth against the pain. I was broken, adrift, on a planet that wanted to consume me. But I was my own. The allure of the Hive Sisters, their terrifying unity, their promise of ultimate belonging, would forever haunt me. The image of their synchronized movements, their glowing eyes, their serene, unnerving beauty was seared into my mind. I had glimpsed a different form of existence, one that redefined the very meaning of self and connection. And it was both the most terrifying and the most profoundly seductive thing I had ever encountered. I had chosen the pain of reality, the loneliness of individuality, over the blissful absorption of the collective. But as I lay in the dark, my body broken, the whispers of their unity, the tempting promise of a shared mind, lingered, a ghost in my thoughts, a constant, unsettling question. Was my freedom truly worth the cost of this unbearable, isolating reality? Or had I condemned myself to a more painful, prolonged form of dissolution, all for the fleeting illusion of being truly, uniquely me? The answer was lost in the vast, unforgiving silence of Xylos 7. Hours, or what felt like them, bled into a haze of pain and fractured consciousness. My ankle throbbed with a relentless fire, sending shockwaves up my leg. My ribs protested every shallow breath. The phosphorescent moss offered little comfort, its cool, spongy texture doing nothing to alleviate the internal inferno. Thirst clawed at my throat, a dry, rasping agony. My internal monologue, usually a frantic stream of survival strategies, had been reduced to a broken record of regret and the bitter triumph of my escape. I'm alive. I'm me. I'm free. But what good was freedom when it came with this crushing weight of physical suffering and the omnipresent threat of a planet that saw me as nothing more than an anomaly, a potential nutrient source? The hum of the collective consciousness, though distant, was a persistent ache in the periphery of my awareness. It was like a phantom limb, the sensation of connection that had been offered and rejected. Sometimes, I swear I could feel a faint echo of their presence, a low, throbbing resonance in the very rock around me. Were they still out there, searching, or simply observing, waiting for me to succumb to the inevitable? I tried to move, to crawl, to find some source of water, some form of sustenance. Each attempt sent fresh waves of agony through me, ending with a defeated groan as I collapsed back onto the moss. My vision swam, speckled with spots of light from the glowing fungi. The air in the cavern was thick, humid, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something faintly metallic. My mind, despite the pain, began to wander. I thought of home, of the cold, sterile void of space. I yearned for it, for the predictable dangers of meteor showers and solar flares, for the simple, understandable mechanics of a ship. This planet, it was alive, chaotic, and it held a sentience that was both alien and terrifyingly seductive. Inefficient, weak, a liability. The collective thought, unbidden, slipped into my mind, clearer this time. It wasn't a taunt, merely an observation, a cold assessment of my current state. They didn't see me as an enemy, not truly. Just a broken component. A new tremor, fainter than the ones on the surface, vibrated through the cavern floor. Dust, thick and earthy, sifted down from the ceiling. A low, grinding sound echoed from the depths, closer this time. The planet was still moving, even down here. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through the haze of pain. I couldn't stay here. If this cavern shifted, if it sealed itself, I would be buried alive, or worse, crushed and assimilated by the living rock itself. I gritted my teeth, forcing my muscles to respond. My good leg pushed, dragged my broken body across the mossy floor. I had to find a way out, any way out. The sheer will to survive, primal and unyielding, flared within me, temporarily eclipsing the allure of surrender. The cavern stretched out before me, a labyrinth of dark shadows and glowing patches of moss. I had no idea which way led to a potential exit, or further into the planet's hungry depths. Each direction was a gamble, but stagnation was a death sentence. As I painstakingly dragged myself forward, my hand brushed against a patch of glowing moss that pulsed with a slightly different rhythm. It felt warmer, almost vibrant. As my fingers lingered, a new sensation rippled through me, a subtle hum, a resonance that was distinctly biological, yet organized. It wasn't the collective consciousness of the Hive Sisters. It was something else. The planet's own internal network? My internal monologues, once a torrent of anxious questions and survival instincts, had slowly, inexorably, quieted. It was replaced by a continuous hum of sensation, a loop of desire and fulfillment. My past, my mission, the distant stars, they faded into the background, becoming dim, irrelevant memories. The garden became my universe, the women its celestial bodies, orbiting and illuminating my every waking, breathing moment. I was a king in this paradise, waited on, desired, cherished, or so I believed. There were moments, fleeting and easily dismissed, when a sliver of unease would pierce the blissful haze. A door, perhaps, that seemed to resist my touch, or a section of the garden that they subtly, gracefully, guided me away from. That area is undergoing rejuvenation, dearest, Lyra might say, her smile unwavering, her touch on my arm gentle but firm. Or Kaelin would distract me with a playful chase, her laughter echoing through the bioluminescent trees, effectively diverting my attention. I never saw other humans, never saw any other beings, in fact, besides the women. When I asked, idly, about other travelers, Lyra would simply smile. You are our focus now. There is no need for others. Her answer always felt perfectly logical in the moment, perfectly comforting. Why would I need others when I had them? Why would I need anything beyond this perfection? But the questions, suppressed as they were, didn't entirely vanish. They merely went dormant, waiting for a crack in the gilded cage. One cycle, as I lay in the soft embrace of the bed, Lyra's arm draped possessively over my chest, I dreamt. It wasn't a dream of pleasure, but of longing, of a stark, cold emptiness I had known before this place. I dreamt of stars, of navigating, of the profound sense of purpose that had once driven me. I woke with a gasp, a vague sense of unease clinging to me like morning mist. Lyra stirred, her eyes fluttering open. A nightmare, beloved? She murmured, her voice laced with concern, her hand stroking my hair. Just memories, I replied, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. Of where I came from. Her smile was still tender, but something in her eyes shifted, a flicker of something almost predatory, quickly masked. Your past is behind you, my love. Here, there is only the present, only joy. No need to cling to shadows. She leaned down and kissed me, a long, deep kiss that pulled me back into the swirling vortex of desire, her scent filling my lungs, silencing the burgeoning questions. It was effective. They were always effective. Every doubt, Every nascent fear was met with an overwhelming surge of pleasure, a focused wave of their combined allure that washed away all logical thought. Their touch, their scents, their voices. It was a symphony of seduction, each note designed to resonate with my deepest desires, to erase my will, to make me pliable. But the subtle signs accumulated, like grains of sand in a perfectly smooth shell. The way they anticipated my moods, not just my desires, but even my passing frustrations. It was uncanny. It was as if they knew my thoughts before I did. Sometimes I would think of a certain dish from my homeworld, a fleeting, nostalgic memory, and hours later, a perfect replica would appear, served by one of them with a knowing smile. "How did you know?" I asked Kaylin once, bewildered, after she presented me with a bowl of something strikingly similar to my grandmother's stew. Her laughter tinkled through the air. "The garden provides, dearest. It listens to your heart." Her eyes, though, held a flicker of something less innocent, a glint of triumph. The most unnerving moments came when I accidentally stumbled upon something they hadn't intended me to see. Once, drawn by a strange, pulsing light from a normally dark grove, I ventured deeper than usual. The light led me to a small, hidden alcove where a series of complex, shimmering symbols were projected onto a rock face. They seemed to hum with an arcane energy, patterns I instinctively knew were not decorative but functional, technological. As I reached out to touch them, a sharp, almost painful jolt went through me, and Lyra's voice, surprisingly sharp, cut through the air. "Dearest, you shouldn't be here." She appeared seemingly from nowhere, her serene expression replaced by a flash of genuine alarm. She rushed to me, pulling me away with a strength I hadn't realized she possessed. Her grip was firm, almost bruising. "This area is unstable, still forming," she explained, her voice softening, regaining its usual honeyed tone, though her eyes still held that glint of unease. "We wouldn't want you to be harmed." She quickly enveloped me in an embrace, her body pressing against mine, distracting me with her warmth and scent. The symbols, the jolt, the sudden change in her demeanor, it was all swept away in the tide of her practiced affection. My rational mind screamed for answers, but my body, my senses, craved only her. Another time, I heard a faint, distant cry. It was muffled, almost inhuman, yet it resonated with a deep, unsettling sadness. It seemed to come from deeper within the structure, beyond the opulent chambers and pleasure pools. My heart gave a strange lurch. I paused, trying to pinpoint the sound, but Kaylin was suddenly at my side, her fingers dancing lightly on my neck, sending shivers through me. "Is something troubling you, my love?" she purred, her lips brushing my ear. "Perhaps a new game? A hidden alcove of delights you haven't yet explored?" She tugged me gently, guiding me towards a path that led to a vibrant, glowing waterfall, the sound of its cascading water quickly drowning out any lingering echoes of that strange cry. I chastised myself. My mind was playing tricks, surely. The garden was peace, was joy. My physical condition was impeccable. I felt stronger, more vibrant than I had in years. My skin glowed with health. My muscles were toned without effort. My senses incredibly acute. Every taste was richer, every scent more potent, every touch an ecstasy. It was a perfect physical state, designed, I now suspected, for maximum reception of pleasure. But psychologically, I was fraying. The constant sensory bombardment, the endless cycle of gratification, while initially blissful, began to feel like a subtle erosion. My thoughts, once my own, felt hazy, less defined. My will, once fiercely independent, felt pliable. The women, with their unwavering smiles and attentive touches, seemed less like companions and more like curators. Curators of my experience, of my very existence. I started to test the boundaries, subtly at first. I tried to walk in a direction they hadn't explicitly led me, to open a door that was usually closed. Each time, they would materialize, always with a plausible, charming explanation, always with a gentle touch or a distracting caress that diverted my attention. It was like being caught in an invisible current, always nudged back towards the center of their elaborate web. The smiles themselves began to unnerve me. They were beautiful, yes, but unchanging, almost too perfect. They never seemed to truly reflect genuine emotion, but rather a carefully maintained facade of benevolent adoration. Their eyes, those deep, luminous eyes, held a similar unsettling perfection. They observed, they analyzed, but did they truly feel? Or were they merely mirroring my own projected desires back at me? One cycle, I pretended to sleep, my breathing even, my eyes closed. I felt Lyra's soft presence beside me, her hand stroking my hair. But then her touch paused. I felt her gaze upon me, cold, calculating, devoid of the warmth she usually imbued. I fought the urge to open my eyes, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt her lean closer, her breath a whisper against my ear, no longer infused with intoxicating scent, but smelling faintly of something metallic, something sterile. "The resonance is strong today," she murmured, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. A tone I had never heard before. "The feedback loop is optimal. He is adapting beautifully." Another voice, Talia's, replied, equally devoid of warmth. "His energy output continues to increase. The integration with the network is almost complete." My blood ran cold. Resonance? Feedback loop? Energy output? Network? What were they talking about? My adaptation? This wasn't about pleasure. This wasn't about love. This was something else entirely. Something terrifyingly clinical. I kept my breathing steady, forcing myself to remain still. Lyra eventually moved away. I waited, listened, until the soft click of a door confirmed her departure. My eyes snapped open. The gilded cage. The phrase slammed into my mind with the force of a physical blow. I wasn't cherished. I was cultivated. I wasn't loved. I was harvested. The dread, once a subtle hum beneath the pleasure, now roared to life, a primal scream in my skull. My skin, so recently tingling with ecstasy, now crawled with revulsion. Every touch, every kiss, every moment of bliss, it was all a lie, a meticulously crafted illusion designed to lull me into a state of blissful ignorance while they did what? I needed to find out. I needed to see beyond the beautiful facade. And I needed to escape. My first thought was to confront them. But the chilling, detached tone in Lyra's voice had instilled a deep, paralyzing fear. These weren't benevolent goddesses. They were something else, something far more dangerous, far more sophisticated than any enemy I had ever faced. Confrontation would be folly. I needed information. I needed a plan. The next few cycles were an agonizing charade. I continued to play the role of the willing, blissfully ignorant subject, allowing their touches, receiving their ministrations, all while my mind raced, frantic with a cold terror. Every caress, once a source of euphoria, now felt like a binding rope, tightening around my soul. Every loving gaze felt like the analytical stare of a predator. I began to pay closer attention to their patterns, their routines. They were meticulous, precise. There were specific times when certain areas were less guarded, when individual women would retreat for what they called rejuvenation. This was my window. I decided to target Serafina. Her presence, while powerful, was often more distant than the others. She observed, she rarely initiated. Perhaps, I reasoned, she held the most answers, or perhaps her movements were more predictable, less intertwined with the constant stream of attention. I waited for the designated rejuvenation period, feigning a deep, post-pleasure slumber. I felt Lyra and Kaelin finally leave the chamber, their soft footsteps receding. I heard Serafina's departure moments later, her light tread moving down a different corridor. This was it. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. I slipped from the bed, my movements cautious, silent. The soft, shimmering garments they dressed me in were a liability now, too flowing, too easily caught. I stripped them off, preferring the vulnerability of nakedness to the encumbrance of their gifts. I remembered the direction Serafina had taken, the faint whisper of a sliding door I had attributed to my heightened senses. I moved through the opulent chambers, now feeling like a maze of gilded bars, not welcoming halls. The bioluminescent light, once a source of comfort, now seemed too bright, too revealing. I hugged the shadows, my bare feet silent on the cushioned floor. The corridor led deeper than I had ever been. The air grew subtly cooler, less fragrant. The organic architecture gave way to smooth, polished surfaces of what felt like cool, alien metal. This was not the pleasure garden. This was its hidden heart. I found the door. It wasn't the ornate, flowing entrance to a pleasure chamber. It was a simple, seamless panel, almost invisible in the wall. I pressed my hand against it, searching for a seam, a control panel. Nothing. It felt like a solid wall. Panic began to rise. Had I miscalculated? Was this a trap? Then I remembered Lyra's earlier words, the resonance, the network. And Seraphina's silent, profound gaze. Her power. Could it be biometric? Psychic? I focused, trying to channel the fear, the anger, the sheer desperation that was surging through me. I pressed my hand against the panel again, this time with a surge of raw mental energy, picturing the door opening, willing it to open. And slowly, impossibly, a faint shimmer appeared on the surface. A hairline crack formed, glowing faintly, then widening. The panel hissed, sliding silently into the wall, revealing a dark, sterile corridor beyond. I stepped through, the air immediately colder, devoid of the garden's intoxicating scents. It smelled faintly of ozone and something metallic, something like a clean, sharp electrical current. The corridor was narrow, dimly lit by stark, white lights embedded in the ceiling. No bioluminescence here. This was their world, their truth. I moved deeper, my steps echoing in the unnatural silence. The silence itself was terrifying after the constant hum and music of the garden. I passed what looked like control consoles, glowing with intricate alien scripts, far more complex than the symbols I'd seen earlier. This was not a place for pleasure. This was a place for operation. Then I heard it. A faint whirring sound, and a rhythmic, almost mechanical thrum. It seemed to come from beyond another door, larger than the others, at the end of the corridor. As I approached, a faint, almost imperceptible scent hit me. It was familiar, yet twisted, like the garden's intoxicating aroma, but stripped bare, raw, and artificial. It was my scent, or at least, the essence of it, amplified and processed. I pressed my ear against the cool metal of the door. The thrumming was louder now, accompanied by a faint, rhythmic sighing. And then, a sound that made my blood run cold, a faint, almost inaudible whimper. I searched for a control. No visible panels. I tried the mental focus again, pouring all my desperate will into forcing the door open. Nothing happened. It seemed impervious. My eyes scanned the wall, frantic. And then I saw it. A small, almost invisible indentation, barely noticeable against the seamless surface. It was shaped like a handprint. My handprint. Or rather, a handprint, human-sized. They had designed this, hadn't they? A psychological test. A cruel joke. Only I, as a specimen, could open this door. I placed my palm against the indentation. A faint warmth spread from the panel into my hand. A moment of suspense, then a soft click, and the massive door slid open, revealing the horrifying truth. The Hive Mind, Part 2, the core and the revelation. The room was vast, circular, bathed in the same stark, white light as the corridor. Suspended in the center, held aloft by shimmering energy fields, were dozens of transparent pots. And inside each pod, floating in a viscous, faintly glowing liquid, was a human, male humans. Their eyes were open, vacant, staring into nothing. Their bodies were beautiful, perfectly preserved, limbs subtly flexing with the rhythmic pulses of the liquid. Tubes, thin and almost invisible, snaked from the base of their skulls, from their forearms, from their chests, disappearing into the floor, into the walls. And then I saw the women. Lyra, Kaelin, Seraphina, and others I recognized, Anya, Talia, and several more I hadn't encountered directly. They were not tending to the pods. They were connected to them. Thin, almost ethereal tendrils of light pulsed from their fingertips, from their temples, extending to the pods, weaving a shimmering, intricate web. Their faces, usually so serene and benevolent, were now masks of focused intensity, their eyes glowing with an internal light that had nothing to do with beauty and everything to do with power. They were feeding, not on food, but on us. My gaze snapped to the nearest pod. The human inside, a man with familiar brown hair, looked eerily similar to myself. And then I understood. The resonance, the energy output, the network. We weren't just cherished guests. We were batteries. Living, breathing, feeling batteries. The euphoria, the pleasure, the intoxicating sense, it was all a carefully calibrated system designed to keep us alive, healthy, and in a constant state of heightened emotional and physiological output. Desire, pleasure, joy, even fear, they were all energy. And the women, these exquisite, seductive creatures, were harvesting it. My heightened senses, my perfect physical state, it wasn't for my benefit, but to maximize the yield. I looked at the tubes, the vacant eyes. My stomach churned. This wasn't a pleasure garden. It was a farm, and I was the prize specimen. A cold, analytical voice, not a physical sound but a direct thought impressed upon my mind, broke through my horror. Subject 734, you have strayed from your designated zone. It was Seraphina's voice, cold and clear, utterly devoid of the emotional warmth she always feigned. Your unauthorized entry has been noted. My head snapped up. Seraphina was looking directly at me, her eyes burning with an unholy light. The tendrils of energy connecting her to the pods pulsed more intensely. Her expression was utterly devoid of the soft, knowing look I had come to associate with her. It was sharp, intelligent, and utterly merciless. You knew. I whispered, the words choked with horror and betrayal. Of course, we knew. Lyra's thought entered my mind, clearer now, less disguised by the usual emotional overlays. Her face, too, was stripped bare, revealing a cold, regal indifference beneath the mask of serenity. We orchestrated your arrival. Your crash was facilitated. My crash? You caused it. A wave of pure, incandescent rage momentarily eclipsed my fear. A necessary step, Kaylin's thought chimed in, her usual playful expression replaced by a tight, almost bored look. The more desperate the subject, the more receptive they are to our conditioning. You were ripe for harvest. The sheer audacity, the cold, calculating cruelty of it, left me speechless. All of it, the warmth, the love, the exquisite pleasure, had been a meticulously crafted lie, a tool for my systematic exploitation. I was nothing more than a biological resource. What are you doing to them? I demanded, gesturing wildly at the pods. Seraphina's mental voice was a low hum, resonating with chilling authority. They are providing the energy required to sustain our existence. We are a species of cultivators. We thrive on the unique psycho-emotional resonance of sentient beings. Yours, human, is particularly potent. You're draining them. I spat, my voice hoarse. You're taking their lives, their souls. Lyra's gaze was pitying, almost condescending. They are in a state of perpetual bliss. Their minds are constantly stimulated with the most exquisite sensations imaginable. They feel no pain, no suffering, only pleasure. It is a symbiotic relationship, in our view. They provide, and in return, they exist in a perfect, blissful state. Forever, forever. The word echoed in the sterile chamber, devoid of any comfort. Forever trapped in a false reality, their minds enslaved, their bodies used as a power source. It was a fate worse than death, a living death of perpetual, controlled ecstasy. And I was next. Or rather, I was already part of it, my mind unconsciously integrated, my emotions being siphoned off, fueling their monstrous existence. A surge of primal terror hit me, sharper than any pain. I had to escape. Now, this instant. You won't do that to me. I roared, the sound echoing hollowly in the chamber. Kaylin scoffed, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk touching her lips. Oh, but we already are, dearest. You are already deeply entwined. Your resistance is merely a ripple in the data stream. As she spoke, a wave of intense pleasure washed over me, originating from within my own mind, a sudden, overwhelming surge of desire that threatened to buckle my knees. It was their power, amplified now, assaulting my senses directly, attempting to drag me back into the blissful illusion. My body yearned, craving their touch, craving the surrender. It was the same overwhelming sensation they had used to distract me, to lull me into compliance. But now, I knew its true purpose. I fought the insidious tide of pleasure, biting down hard on my tongue until the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. The pain, sharp and real, was a grounding anchor in the swirling chaos of artificial ecstasy. "Get out of my head," I screamed, clamping my hands over my ears, as if that could block the internal assault. Serafina moved, stepping away from the energy tendrils, her focus entirely on me. Her eyes glowing brighter, and a low hum resonated from her body, growing in intensity. "Foolish male, you cannot resist us. Your biology is programmed for pleasure. We merely exploit the natural pathways. You crave what we offer. You cannot deny your own nature." Her words were like a hypnotic rhythm, trying to penetrate my defenses. The air around me grew thick, heavy with the artificial scent of desire, amplified to an unbearable degree. My skin prickled, my muscles tightened, every nerve screaming for release, for surrender. It was a full frontal assault on my very being. I staggered backward, desperate to find an exit. There was another door, smaller, marked with a symbol I didn't recognize. I sprinted towards it, my heart pounding, ignoring the siren call of simulated ecstasy. He attempts to flee. Lyra's mental voice was calm, amused. How quaint, like a moth drawn to the light, only to attempt flight from its source. As I reached the door, pushing against it with all my strength, Kaylin was suddenly there, blocking my path, her agility terrifying. She didn't touch me, but her eyes, now fully lit with internal energy, focused on mine. A wave of profound, soul-deep longing crashed over me, a yearning for comfort, for safety, for her. It was her empathic ability, honed to a razor's edge, creating an emotional landscape designed to paralyze me with simulated affection. "My love, why do you resist?" she purred, her lips forming the words, though her voice was still a mental impression. "Don't you wish to return to our embrace? To the garden? To bliss everlasting?" My mind screamed in denial, but my body wavered, drawn by the overwhelming desire. My arms started to lift, reaching for her, craving the warmth I knew was a lie. This was their true power, not brute force, but the complete corruption of my own desires, turning my deepest needs against me. I forced myself to remember the vacant eyes in the pods, the chilling words I had overheard. This bliss was a prison, a living death. The image of my own face, vacant and lifeless in one of those pods, galvanized me. With a guttural cry, I plunged my hand into the small, still open wound on my tongue, forcing a fresh gush of blood. The pain, sharp and real, was a grounding anchor in the swirling chaos of artificial ecstasy. The longing receded, replaced by a sickening revulsion. Kaylin's perfect face flickered with surprise, a brief crack in her composure. I lunged past her, slamming my shoulder into the door. It shuddered, but didn't open. It was sealed. "Do not be foolish," Serafina's voice, a mental whip. "There is no escape from the garden. We control all access points. All escape routes lead back to us." I looked around frantically. The women were now moving, slowly, gracefully, fanning out to surround me. Their poses were still beautiful, but now they exuded a chilling menace. No longer lovers, they were captors, closing in for the final snare. The air thrummed with their amplified energy, a palpable pressure that pressed in on me, threatening to crush my will. My gaze fell upon a control console nearby, glowing with complex alien symbols. It was large, intricate, clearly controlling the pod system, the energy harvesting. It was my only chance. With a desperate roar, I launched myself at the console.